We've all seen the headline, Bitcoin is boiling the oceans. So there's this prevailing misconception that Bitcoin is an unsustainable environmental disaster. So today we're going to tackle this criticism, and we're actually going to showcase an awesome project that's using Bitcoin mining to boil the oceans and produce sea salt. So thank you for anyone dropping into this stream. Do pop in any questions you have in the chat. But I am here with Colin Sullivan from Mintgreen. Colin, before we dive into this really cool project that you're doing, can you give us like a 30-second to 60-second overview of how Bitcoin mining works and why is so much electricity being used?
Right. Well, Bitcoin mining basically secures transactions for the blockchain of Bitcoin. Essentially, Bitcoin exists in a hostile environment and is being attempted to be attacked constantly. There's sort of an algorithm that runs and this provides security by sort of brute force, and each sort of block that gets cracked in the equation releases the transactions along with a bunch of inflationary currency, which is paid to the miners. And that's sort of what the business model of mining originated from, this a little bit left over in the blocks. And that's sort of how Bitcoin reaches its liquidity maximum over time.
Thank you. So what makes your mining process a little bit different, and why is it sustainable?
Well, the biggest criticism Bitcoin faces is generally around energy consumption. And I don't believe there's really a free lunch when it comes to the security of a cryptocurrency. What we're doing a bit different is we are selling heat energy in an immersion system. So I just saw that you pulled up our lab prototype there. So essentially we put the hashing boards into a dielectric fluid. It's non-conductive. It looks very strange because you would think it looks like it's something that you should shorten, but they're not. And you're able to run them at much higher temperatures. And we capture these temperatures and use them for commercial purposes. And so that allows us to get a premium for our heat energy and open up markets that might not otherwise be available. I mean, right now, cryptocurrency miners scour the globe. They look for the cheapest energy prices. They go to Outer Mongolia or Kazakhstan. Whereas we don't really care about cheap prices. We're looking for carbon regulated markets and sort of high heat prices. And energy and heat seem to track each other in the markets we've seen.
So are you an energy company or a Bitcoin company?
I get that one a lot. It's interesting. We are a Bitcoin company, I would say. We can't, like, being a utility is a slippery slope as far as the regulatory hoops. So most of our revenue will be coming from cryptocurrency mining. However, the amount of revenue generated from the sale of heat is not immaterial. I mean, locally, we're looking between $400,000 to $700,000 per year per megawatt in heat sales. It's not insignificant. Whereas by Bitcoin, it would be something like $2 million would be the revenue.
So let's dive in a little bit about the energy use. So you have miners and they're generating heat. And typically in mining, there is a lot of heat that needs to come off the process and either be vented out. That's traditionally why cold climates have been preferable, because you don't have to have high cooling costs. And now, so what are you doing with this heat? You are finding loads or commercial or industrial sites that actually need heat?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So should we get into the...
Yeah, we'll dive into it.
Okay. So we recently signed a contract with Vancouver Island Salt Company. This is a great use case for us. They have a salt process that makes these flakes that need a very particular temperature range, which our immersion systems can provide. So it's actually in the mid 70 degrees C. And in a saline solution of around 28% or so, these nice flakes start slaking out, and we can sort of provide this. Now, previously they were using electric elements, and we're sort of splitting the cost of energy with them, or maybe doing a little better than that, with immersion filled, so the oil filled coils that are hot, and we'll be heating this in place of direct electricity power. So in this case, we're saving them money on the actual cost they'll be using. In other use cases, we're sort of matching what natural gas costs, but we're removing a lot of carbon from the equation. which has other benefits as far as cost as well. Yes, this is interesting too. This is the scale they hope to attain.
Okay, so this is a pool of water that's evaporating and to generate salt?
They have much smaller tanks than that. That is actually over 300 feet long. That's actually their expansion plan. So that could be honestly a multi-megawatt facility to evaporate from something that size. But that is on the property as well. So that is actually used for a lot of movies right now. So like a scene. But we expect that's kind of down the line for them. They're a growing company rapidly, and that's kind of the scale we're looking at with these guys, which is great. Presently, you may see these tables of sort of pools. They sort of slake out pieces of salt, and that's what we're going to be involved in. Probably something on the order of precisely. So you can see that's very, very salty water. They sort of scoop it out, and it's electrically fed there by elements, whereas we would basically put our a double-walled heat exchanger in there and just provide the heat to them, thereby reducing their costs and making Bitcoin salt.
So yours is different because instead of using air, which is maybe less heat conductive than the special liquid cooling that you're using a more optimal way to transfer heat from the miners to production?
Definitely. You can't do much in the way of heat transfer from a less dense medium. So like when you have enough fluid, you can use much more. You can also push the boards a lot harder. So the meltdown temperatures, without getting too deep in this, they can be over 100 degrees C. You couldn't get near that at air temperature, but with a dense fluid, you can get a lot warmer. And so it's all about balancing flow rates to get that temperature as high as possible, which is what we want with full utilization of the heat.
Is that kind of like overclocking your PC gaming computer, or?
It's kind of similar. It basically allows us to run at a higher frequency. So basically, like with an ASIC miner, we do have some latitude to turn them up and down according to demand. But we're looking to fill a base load. But with the immersion fluid, absolutely, you can run a gaming computer much harder in a fluid. Now, usually they're not contact immersed like this. I'm sure some are. So this is an example of a 7 kilowatt lab prototype that we have here in headquarters. So this is actually 3 miners broken up in a radial formation. It's a vinyl 3D printed chassis inside, and essentially the fluid gets pumped out of the top, circulates into a tank here, heats the water. There's also a plate and frame heat exchanger runs through. So it's basically the heat is going from the oil to the water in the heat exchanger. The water's being warmed, pumped back in. The oil is then slightly cooled, pumped back into the tank, and it's a closed system that keeps going.
And in addition to the sea salt, where you're boiling the ocean to generate artisanal sea salt, I almost feel like Bitcoiners are like, I want that salt on my steak.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of co-branding opportunities. We're talking to a few companies.
That's awesome.
Who are very excited about that idea. So I want it on my table for sure.
Is there a second kind of project that you guys are working on?
Oh, I see. Yes. Well, we have not announced this yet. But we have inked the deal. We have a deal with Shelter Bay Distillery. So they're doing whiskey, sort of Scotch-style whiskey in a similar area on Vancouver Island. It's a beautiful location.
Does that go with steak?
Yeah, we can have a full maximalist meal here, I think. Your whiskey and your salt and your steak. Yeah, no, they presently 25,000 liters of mash heated, again in the 75-degree range. Right now they're using natural gas, so this is an opportunity for us to sort of make their process a little more green. We haven't really looked at the bit whiskey yet, but I think that could be fun too. But the location both of these places are is absolutely pristine and gorgeous. They're in Campbell River, just outside Comox. It's a great property, 200 acres of waterfront. It's very cool.
Sounds like a perfect place for a dinner and maybe a maximalist conference.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's definitely retreat worthy, for sure.
Awesome. So can you talk a little bit about how your process makes it more sustainable, like mine more stable?
Well, so say in Canada, for example, 29% of residential heating comes from electric baseboards. These electric baseboards are basically just burning electrons, and it does nothing more than that. That alone is 3 times the entire consumption of the current Bitcoin network.
Wow.
So it is like, so it's like Bitcoin is consuming a lot, but compared to a lot of other uses of electricity, it's very small still. And so we are essentially using this energy twice to secure, help secure billions of dollars of transactions, and also for, industries that need it at a reasonable scale.
And it's not, and you're recycling heat. So when I worked on low carbon policy and a transition, how do we get Canada to a more low carbon future? One of the cross-cutting technologies, both in commercial, industrial, and even within homes, the tech was really, heat recovery and heat reuse. So if you're already generating heat, if you can then cycle that back in, whether it's a process or district heating, it's a tech that will actually help reduce carbon, because you don't have to use that twice. And actually, it's really interesting too, because for example, in Ontario, greenhouses that grow fruits and veggies, they traditionally use coal. So
wow.
I know there are some places that are experimenting, whether it's growing weed or fruits and veggies. So there are miners that are looking at food production, and this kind of heat recovery can be quite beneficial. So I think it's amazing though that we're seeing this in Canada being prototyped, completely new tech in some ways with the immersion cooling, and it's right in our kind of backyard.
Yeah, no, it is great. There's a lot of innovation in the space on this. I mean, any sort of application needs heat is fine. We love district energy for our sort of final go-to-market, because the demand is 24/7, 365.
Yeah.
The distillery may have similar.
You want to be running all the time.
Exactly. So essentially, they will have sort of peak and base loads of heat requirements. We want to be basically using 100% of our energy for heat on the hottest day of the summer. So whoever's using their dishwasher or having a shower, fulfilling that need, and letting their sort of other systems handle the very high spikes, in the middle of the winter.
Yeah. Are there any carbon policies that are going to help you out a little bit here?
I think there are. Those are sort of moving targets a little bit for us, and you have to have a certain scale at which to make it make sense. It's probably not going to play into too much in Shelter Bay and Vancouver Island Salt Company, but moving forward, I think it's certainly well.
Does Vancouver have a district heating mandate?
Vancouver has a mandate presently for 30% of all new district energy to be coming from zero carbon sources. Okay. And so we satisfy this need. There's not really many options in the way of zero carbon. Generally, they're looking at biomass, which is very difficult from a supply chain and cost side.
Yeah.
Electric boilers, I mean, that's more the cheapest option. But the difference is they have to pay the maintenance on it, they have to pay the capital cost, whereas basically we would supply all the equipment and maintain it and just sort of sell the heat directly.
That's fantastic. And I mean, BC is blessed with a lot of hydropower, so we're pretty renewable.
Yeah, it's kind of green all around here, and this is a good market, being that it is carbon regulated as well. I mean, this is why we're really excited about this. In BC alone, there's enough district energy for 1/3 of the entire Bitcoin network, so we believe even locally we could achieve single digits for the entire hash rate.
The entire Bitcoin network?
Yes, the energy consumption is about 1/3 the network and district energy just here. So we're focusing more on the new expansions, because those are the most carbon regulated, going to 100% by 2030. But there's a lot of meat on the bone here. I mean, we're happy to look at other places as well, but we think starting here is a really strong use case for what we're doing.
I think what's really cool is, so BlackRock just came out, full force over the last week. Their CIO, their CEO, talking about how Bitcoin, people should take a look at it, right? And what's interesting to me is, because originally in my before Bitcoin rabbit hole, I actually came from the carbon space, and BlackRock made big waves when they, shifted towards kind of triple bottom line thinking and told, in the investment industry, we should be looking at planet, people, profit. And I've actually had questions when we were fundraising for the Bitcoin fund on the Toronto Stock Exchange. I've had concerns coming from, people that manage other people's money, from advisors saying, hey, my clients are really concerned about sustainability. how does that actually mesh with Bitcoin, because it wastes so much energy? But I think this is kind of unique, where we're transitioning the industry towards more green, sustainable ways that can actually address kind of maybe some of the criticisms, or find more efficient ways to operate.
I wouldn't argue. I mean, I don't think traditional mining yet satisfies this sort of triple bottom line.
Yeah.
However, I feel like there's a bit of an odd extra moral judgment that's placed on Bitcoin for mining, because it's a little less understood.
Yeah, let's talk about the criticisms. What do you say to those salty critics that Bitcoin wastes energy?
Well, I mean, any economic activity can consume energy. I mean, people playing video games consumes energy. Is this a waste? I mean, I don't think so. But if there's an economic incentive, people are going to do it. But the fact is, cryptocurrency mining doesn't just facilitate a Bitcoin amount of transactions. I think Samson Moe from Blockstream had a recent post saying it's half a million per second presently in value, which is significant. But it's not just transferring. It is the store of value aspect of it. And so every 10 minutes, by each block being made, $300 billion is being proven to exist and being proven to be liquid. And so that's quite significant. And I think if you think of what constitutes a currency, and not just what constitutes Visa, which is basically just transferring money, like existing currency around, you start to look at something much more large and consumptive. I mean, U.S. dollar is a hegemon. What actually backs that? Well, it's not gold. It's the entire economy. It's the entire political strength of the country, which is
military base.
That's certainly a huge part of it. I mean, and most wars are now sort of fought economically. So you can imagine that for the world to buy into that having value, the amount of energy is very hard to quantify. Whereas with Bitcoin, it's very easy, so it's sort of an easy target. But there's no tanks involved, so it's a little bit more, let's say, closer to triple bottom line from the outset, I think.
So what you're saying is it's about the network security. So you need to expend tremendous amounts of energy, but that provides a certain level of security, because you can't, as people say, hack Bitcoin incorrectly, but that's kind of the idea. But on the other hand, you're also talking, so it's not just the security element, it's the actual, it's almost its own country in a way, a new monetary regime. Whereas
exactly, it's a currency. It's a currency without a country. And I mean, if you were to start, Magdalena bucks, I mean, it could get you in a lot of trouble. It would be difficult to do. But if you were able to pull it off, I mean, it would take tremendous power and resources to do that. There's no two ways about this. So it's kind of like saying, email takes a lot of energy, but not thinking about what it takes to mail a piece of mail in an airplane and drop it off. I mean,
transport cash, like daily Brinks trucks driving around moving money, printing money, manufacturing gold, the environmental destruction. There's in some countries a lot of cyanide is used, but then there's also massive amounts of energy that are being used to produce gold. Transport gold. So I think there's that element too that I've heard when it comes to silencing the critics. But I think one other important thing is if we're not burning coal to mine Bitcoin. When you look at studies, for example, CoinShares has done a deep dive. Cambridge, the university has also done a deep dive into the renewables percentage of the mix of energy being used to mine Bitcoin, and it's not just fossil. It's actually a good amount is green mining. And can you talk a bit about what's happening with China, with miners in China?
Yeah, well, China is basically got two seasons of mining, and one season is largely hydroelectric, which is the lower cost for them. And the other season is basically their dry season, where they move sort of modular containers to mine with coal. Coal and thermal coal is in particular, probably among the more expensive ways to mine presently, which is good. So I think anytime there's a use case like Mintgreen has where we can drastically undercut the cost of something like coal by using hydroelectric and then reusing that once again. The competitiveness of the nature of the network is that we are supplanting these highly consumptive, carbon intensive ways of mining. It's not necessarily seen one-to-one, but it does work out that way because mining is competitive by nature.
And I've also been hearing that Chinese miners are looking to shift towards North America because they're having issues in selling Bitcoin to pay for electricity. So as they shift, and depending on where they land, for example, if they land in British Columbia or parts of Canada where we do have a super green or renewable mix, whether it's hydro, primarily hydro actually, or nuclear, then we're shifting off of coal, and it's kind of a better news story for Bitcoin. Is there?
Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of over time. We're seeing much more diversification in the location of mining. It was highly centralized, I think, for a time in China. I think they're sort of dipping below 50% globally now. We're seeing a lot of investment in North America. We're seeing some in South America. So it's spreading out quite a bit. I mean, the fact is the semiconductor producers are generally, for these machines are generally in China, but they're business people, they're looking for a good price. And I think thermal coal is sort of falling behind on that, which is good for Bitcoin and good for the world, really.
Even renewables costs have fallen below coal recently, so we're shift, right?
The technology is moving along very fast, and I think Mintgreen wouldn't really engage in a location that wasn't also green source energy. Yeah. So we're sort of, it's green source, and then upon that, also using that again. I don't think there's very many applications of energy where you can say definitively it is being used twice like that.
Yeah. Well, heat recovery is a huge economic efficiency gain that we can do. So I think we're going to be wrapping it up unless there's any questions from the audience. But overall, thanks for hanging out, everyone. We'll do this.
That was a lot of fun, Magda. Thank you.
I know, it was awesome. I think I learned a lot, and frankly, I'm just so excited to see this happening in Canada.
We're excited to have you for some Bitcoin whiskey.
Oh yeah, I'm coming over. Home heating. Maybe I should set up some miners for home heating. What?
You definitely should. I mean, this is how we heat both the office and everything else. I mean, we're using electric power here, so I mean that's how we got our start. We can't really get away from it. We've unplugged all of our baseboards.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, because you're at the site.
Yeah, it's actually pretty funny. Our internet went down, and I was telling our internet service provider that we're freezing. We need the internet back. They're like, "What are you talking about?"
Awesome. All right. Thanks.
Hey, thanks so much. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.